Patrick Dolan, Principal Officer for Patient Safety Policy and Governance, and Mr Niall Sinnott, Principal Officer, eHealth and Health Information Systems. And the following officials from the Health Service Executive: Ms Patricia Wheelahan, Assistant National Director, Services for Older People, Access and Integration, Ms Amanda Casey, Chief Social Worker with the HSE, and Mr Pat Healy, National Director of the National Services and Schemes with the HSE. And finally, we'll be joined by officials from the Office of the Comptroller and Auditor General, including Mr Seamus McCarthy, who is a permanent witness to the committee, and Mr Mark Brady, Deputy Director of Audit. You're all very welcome. So I also want to explain some limitations to the parliamentary privilege and the practice of the Houses as regards to references you may make to other persons in your evidence. The evidence of witnesses physically present or who give evidence from within the parliamentary precinct is protected pursuant to both the Constitution and statute by absolute privilege. This means that you have an absolute defence against any defamation action for anything you say at the meeting. However, you're expected not to abuse that privilege, and it is my duty as Cathaoirleach to ensure that this privilege is not abused. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you'll be directed to discontinue your remarks. It is imperative that you comply with any such direction. Witnesses are also reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way that may make him or her or it identifiable, or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks. It is imperative that you comply with any such direction. So I'll now ask Mr Seamus McCarthy, the Comptroller and Auditor General, to make his opening remarks.
The Health Information and Quality Authority was established in 2007. Its primary functions are to set standards and regulate health and social care services, and to advise on the collection and sharing of information across healthcare services. Much of the authority's work is focused on inspections across the disability, older people's and children's sectors. Designated residential care centres must formally register with the authority. The authority's financial statements, like some others in the broader health sector, are presented with separate income and expenditure accounts covering current and capital spending. The income and expenditure account on the current side records total income in 2023 of €38.5 million. Of this, €7.4 million, or around 19%, was received from registration and annual fees paid by regulated residential centres. Most of the remaining income in 2023 was received from the Vote for Health. €1.1 million was received from the Vote for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. The latter was provided in respect of the authority's role in monitoring international protection accommodation services residential facilities. The authority's recurrent expenditure in 2023 was €38.3 million, of which 75% related to staff costs. In 2023, the authority's average headcount was 351, with 80% of those staff employed in regulation functions. The authority recognised capital funding of €5.8 million in 2023, including €4.78 million from the Vote for Health, as reflected in the capital income and expenditure account. Total capital expenditure was also €5.8 million, €2.3 million of which was spent on what is referred to as software in the cloud. This expenditure relates mainly to the costs of a major ongoing ICT project for the development of new regulatory software systems for the authority, to be hosted by an external service provider under a multi-year service contract. The ICT software development costs are a charge on the authority's capital income and expenditure account, but under accounting standards, they do not result in the creation of a related intangible asset on the authority's statement of financial position. I issued a qualified audit opinion in respect of the authority's financial statements for 2023. The qualification is only in relation to the authority's accounting treatment for pensions. As provided for by law, the Minister for Health has elected to direct certain health sector bodies, including the authority, to account for staff pensions as they are paid. Generally accepted accounting practice requires recognition of pension liabilities as they accrue. Other than that, I am satisfied that the financial statements give a true and fair view of the authority's financial position at the year end and of the transactions for the year.
So we now move to our other witnesses. As you can imagine, as a result of the RTE Investigates programme, there was significant concern from members in regards to what was portrayed there, and so the committee, I know, intend to ask questions in relation to that, and hope that you'll be able to provide reassurance, but also in relation to other questions that have been raised by the Comptroller and Auditor General. So we'll now move to the opening statements of our other witnesses, and so I'll ask Ms. Angela Fitzgerald to make the opening statement on behalf of HIQA.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for inviting us to discuss HIQA's financial statements, and we will, of course, be happy to address the questions that the Cathaoirleach raised. I'm joined by my colleagues Finbar Colfer, who's the Chief Inspector, Sean Angland, COO, Sean Egan, Director of Healthcare Regulation, and Susan Cliff, Deputy Chief Inspector, Older Persons. As was already said, HIQA was established in 2007 as the Independent Regulatory Authority. Our role is to establish the best possible outcomes for people using health and social services. As has already been said, our remit includes setting standards, regulation of public, voluntary and private health and social services, and providing evidence to inform and support government policy decisions. Protecting the safety and welfare of people using health and social services is at the heart of what we do. Regulation seeks to provide independent oversight of the quality and safety of care and support, and aims to drive continuous improvement. To put our role into context, the Chief Inspector regulates over 2,000 nursing homes and disability services. He also has a role in relation to specific aspects of children's services. In healthcare, we monitor the quality and safety of public and private healthcare services. We also have a role in relation to permanent IPAS centres. It has to be said that the primary responsibility for day-to-day quality and safety must rest with the service provider. Our role as the regulator is to ensure that providers have systems and processes that are effective to assure themselves in the first instance that people using their services are getting the support they need and deserve. This is why governance and management is a central part of our inspection. It seeks to allow us to help providers move beyond simple regulatory compliance towards continuous improvement. So what have we done and how have we had an impact? I think it's fair to say that in the lifetime of HIQA, we've driven a move from a medical to a social model of care in the area of social care, and in particular a focus on person-centred and human rights-based approach. Often the improvements achieved for people are things that we in society take for granted. For example, they mean that people living in nursing homes can exercise choice and autonomy in their daily lives, and can enjoy privacy and dignity. In disability, we've seen a very significant move out of congregated settings into community, and people tell us every day about the impact that's had on their lives. And in children's services, where they are most at risk, we have driven improved oversight and improved delivery of safety for those children most at risk. We also know we've a lot more to do as the regulator, and as the regulatory landscape changes, we also have to adapt and change. Other areas that we're involved in are about setting national standards. National standards and regulations set the bar for driving continuous improvement. We also provide advice to the Minister and to the HSE on clinical and cost effectiveness on health policies in areas like vaccination and screening programmes. One example was during COVID, our team played a pivotal role in providing the evidence to support government to make rapid decisions on public health issues. We work collaboratively with the Department of Health on informing national information policy and digital health policies, and we are currently developing an ethical framework for AI, which is rapidly coming into health and social care. Listening and responding to people and taking the Cathaoirleach's point has to be part of what we do every day. We listen to residents, patients and families on inspections, but we also try and use our voice to advocate for policy or regulatory change, and we can talk about that today. One other way that may not be necessarily associated with HIQA is the National Care Experience Programme. This is a unique national collaboration between HIQA, the HSE, the Department of Health and patient advocacy groups, and the findings give us very clear insights to what matters to patients and their families and allow us to help service providers drive those improvements. We also work with the department to try and look at structural or other issues that might improve the experience of residents. We are 18 years old. Our chair often describes us as a teenager organisation, but our remit has grown significantly under successive governments. In the past 2 years alone, as evidence of that rapid expansion, we're now moving into monitoring private hospitals. We have a role in relation to international protection. We were asked by government to review the Midwest in terms of urgent and emergency services. We've contributed significantly to the work of the department and the Law Reform Commission in the areas of adult safeguarding. We drafted standards for home support services, which will be the bedrock of the regulatory framework that's coming. We've recently taken over the National Immunisation Advisory Committee, and as was mentioned earlier on, we've published a review on the use of non-CE springs in children. We've also been asked to take on a role in relation to critical entities resilience, which is how do you protect the state against external shock. To the matters in hand today, financial resources, the CNAG has already mentioned some of the areas, so I'll be brief. But it is important to say that we have strong internal controls overseen by our board to ensure that our spend is fully aligned with the allocations we get. We are committed to ensuring high standards of corporate governance and compliance, and we have secured and retained our ISO accreditation. We have effective and constructive engagement with the Department of Health to ensure that our resources are appropriate for our remit and are used appropriately. Our budget increased by 11% on the previous year, and that is a clear reflection of our expanding remit and also of the constructive relationship we have with the department. The CNAG referenced our spend. Like other organisations, 75% of our spend goes on staff costs. We always operate within our approved allocation, and all new positions are sanctioned by the department. I'd like to say something about our staff. Our staff are committed to making a difference to everyone that we serve. As CEO, I am proud and I'm struck every day by the strong sense of unity of purpose, shared values and passion among our staff. We invest significantly in our people to ensure that we maintain that sense of purpose as we grow and diversify. Critically, we must continue to attract, develop, promote and retain high calibre staff. One of the big enablers for us as a growing organisation is digital solutions, and this is very much aligned with government policy. We've committed to move it to digital platforms to allow us to take on new functions, to optimise our research capability, and to make sure that in the regulatory space that we have real-time access to data and analytics, which will inform our regulatory approach, but also will allow us between inspections to look at surveillance of services. We all know about the threat of cyber attack, and for us as a regulator, that's critically important, protecting our systems and our people against external attack. So we have invested in a multi-annual developed digital strategy, which we hope will ensure that we're agile, fit for purpose and a secure organisation. As the Cathaoirleach said, we must be always open to improving and learning. What was broadcast on the RTE Investigations programme was truly shocking and should never have happened. I want to apologise again to those directly affected and to anyone who feels let down by us as the regulator. I can assure you that we are taking the regulatory action with the nursing homes operated by this provider group. We are working closely with the Minister and the Department on those areas where the regulatory and policy framework can and should be strengthened. We're also engaging directly with families and residents. But it's also important that we look at ourselves. We are committed to strengthening our regulatory role and its impact, and to looking critically at how the current assurance we have allows providers in the first instance to assess their own leadership, culture and behaviour, and allows us to look more closely at that. Allows us to leverage the use of data through regulatory reform to support ongoing surveillance between inspections, and allows us to amplify communication with the public about what we do, how we do it, and where we can learn. I'd like to thank you today for inviting us to speak to you on our accounts, but on wider issues. And I know I speak on behalf of our board and all of our staff in reiterating our shared commitment to develop the very best outcomes for all who use our health and social services. We want to be the trusted regulator. We know that there are challenges based on recent events, but we will seek to work with all of our stakeholders to drive continuous improvement in the overall experience of people using our services. Thank you, and we're very happy to take whatever questions you may have for us.
Just to note that we will suspend the meeting for a break at 12 p.m. and then resume shortly afterwards. So we now open the floor to members, and the lead speaker today is Deputy Cathy Bennett with 15 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Firstly, I'd like to welcome everybody here today, and then I'll just get straight into my line of questioning. So just in relation to Benevan Manor, where there was 198 complaints made of neglect over a 3-year period, it just beggars me to believe, you know, what would have happened in that instance when there was complaints? What would happen directly after a complaint comes in?
Yeah. I will ask our Deputy Chief Inspector to talk specifically about Benevan. Just to say that we rely on our inspection process, but we also rely on what we call statutory notifications, which is where providers are obliged to notify us of anything of concern, but we will give some context on that. And secondly, we also rely on direct feedback from staff and service users. So we have a number of feeds, but we do assess and risk rate them. But I think I'll ask Susan maybe to come in directly on that piece.
Okay, so our process is to review every piece of information that we receive to assess the level of risk posed to each resident and to look at what action has been taken on foot of that information already. If we're not satisfied with the action that has been taken, we can revert to the provider, request additional information. We can ask them to carry out a further work if we feel that that's what's necessary based on the information that we already have. We can schedule an inspection on foot of that, or we can align that with the rest of the information we have about this centre and use it on a line of inquiry for an inspection that may already be planned for that centre. The final thing we will do is we will look at the information, and if it makes reference to areas outside of our area of expertise or regulatory power, we may look to refer that to other authorities, such as environment health officers, fire authorities, the guards, or to the health and safety authority if that's what's relevant.
Okay. And how many times has that happened that you have referred instances of complaint to the Gardaí, to the fire? You know, how many times have you referred complaints?
In relation to the transfer of information to external agencies, we look at that in two ways: under information that's specific to the protected disclosure process, and in 2024 we had 2, 9, 12, 20, 22, 34 referrals made from the protected disclosure processes, and then we also have our referrals. I can get that information for you.
Yeah,
I do have it somewhere here.
That's okay.
Sorry, I have it here. In 2024, 28 referrals were made to An Garda Síochána, 2 to the Department of Social Protection, 2 to the Fire Authority, 1 to the Food and Safety Authority, 1 to HSE Adult Safeguarding. They were the 2024
So what was the
numbers.
next step then after those referrals? What happened then? Were these nursing homes, were they closed or what happened?
No.
They weren't closed?
They wouldn't have been closed.
Right, okay.
No.
And so what is your role then as in HIQA? Do you have no authority to close nursing homes?
We can close nursing homes.
And why would they not be closed if they're not carrying out rules and regulations in the correct manner? Why would they not be closed?
We wouldn't close a nursing home unless there was absolutely no other option, and we had no hope that this registered provider would deliver quality care to the residents. We have a pyramid, if you like, of escalating regulatory engagement that we use. So where incidents arise first, we will have a cautionary meeting with providers. Our first place is probably to give feedback and say, you need to get this sorted. If that doesn't work.
But that obviously is not working, because that's what's happened and this has been ongoing. Like, I think HIQA have been in place for since 2007. So I'm just wondering how many nursing homes have been closed in that time. Angela had said there earlier on that you set the standards. So what are the standards that we're setting here if nursing homes are getting reports like what was on RTE? I just wonder, you know, is HIQA enforcing? Have they got any enforcement, or what is happening? And nobody's running scared that HIQA's coming out because there's nothing actually happening. There's no enforcement after you go to a nursing home and find that they haven't been in compliance.
So I think Deputy, important to maybe distinguish. We do close nursing homes, and we've given.
How many have you closed?
So have you?
So in 2020 we closed 2. In 2021, 3 nursing homes were closed on foot of action from the Chief Inspector. 1 in 2022, 3 in 2023. 1, 2, 3. A total of 10 notices issued in 2024, and of those 7 have closed. 1 is still under appeal. And in 2025, 1 nursing home closed on foot of proceedings that were instigated in 2024. So what that shows is where we cannot be satisfied that registered providers will take the action to keep residents safe, we will use the law and the legal framework that's available to us. But we're very conscious a nursing home is home to a resident, to a large number of residents in some cases. So decisions like that are only made as the last option. We will work with providers in the initial phase, requiring them to deliver the quality of care they're being funded to deliver.
And Benevan Manor, is it closed?
Benevan Manor is still opened.
It's still opened after receiving?
Operate, yes.
After that RTA disclosure, it's still opened?
It is.
So I think it's important to say that, first of all, I think we've said publicly and on record and within the report that we've made available to you that while our regulatory inspections identified areas in relation to staffing, supervision and poor training and qualifications of staff, and they were part of why we were in escalation, at no stage through our inspection process did we witness anything that was witnessed in the programme. And if that was ever witnessed by our staff...
Then maybe your inspections aren't thorough enough if they're not...
So I think I think that's a fair comment.
Yeah.
Are we doing enough? Do we see enough? I think what it's important to say is that what was evident from some of the footage is that some staff knew that this was the wrong thing and chose to do it. And I think there are limits in terms of what an inspection process will do. What we have been trying to look at is two or three things, and I think the second thing is we are in an escalatory process with both centres, but with the group as well. So I think there's a programme of inspections underway. We have applied some restrictions to admissions, which is one of the safety mechanisms you do so that the staff that are available can deal more appropriately with the number of residents that are there. And we will take action. We are obviously in the process of doing that, but we can't comment on what those actions will be. But I think it's a fair question to say, does the inspection process reveal enough? And I think that is a question that we are confronted with, and we are looking at that in a number of ways. First of all, the regulatory powers. Secondly, that question of surveillance data. So, for example, the routine information that was relevant in relation to Benevan was the level of turnover of staff between inspections, the change in the profile of residents. That was not information that currently statutorily is made available to us.
Sorry, Angela, it's just my time's running out. I've just a few more minutes and I have a good few more questions I want to ask.
Of course.
So I'm just saying, over 2 decades, you haven't discovered that your process has not been working. In two decades since HIQA has been formed, it's taken you 2 decades to realise that the process of inspection that currently is ongoing is actually not working.
Well, I think
it's not working, obviously, if RTE can walk in there and get that camera footage. So I want to ask you about your inspections. Are they always notified? So you just walk in, it's always unnotified?
Yeah, I might answer that,
yes.
Deputy. In terms of our inspections, they're not always walk-in, and for example in 2024 in the nursing home sector, 84% of our inspections were unannounced, so they weren't.
But should they not all be unannounced? Just walk in to see the real picture.
And often that's the question asked of us. Yeah. We do have a percentage that are announced for various reasons. One being that for renewal of registration, we may need to access particular personnel, particular management, particular staff. We also, more importantly, our announced inspections allow residents and their families to know that we're coming and engage with us on that. So we do a small percentage of our inspections are announced, but majority of them are unannounced.
Okay.
All of our risk inspections are unannounced.
I'm just going to move on.
Yeah.
So I just want to say then, do you have confidence? Do you have confidence that next year there won't be another RT documentary like there was, or like I'm sure like when this HIQA was formed, this was the whole, it was to ensure that something like this hadn't happened, because something like that did happen, and this is why.
I think it's important that we acknowledge the challenges that were presented by this, and that we look at how we can continuously improve. But I think it's also important to say, and this is not just us, it is evidenced by the lived experience. If you look at the overview reports that were published, which looked back in disability and in older persons, there has been a demonstrable and sustained change in the lived experience of people who live in residential care. I've been in that situation myself with my own parents and with my in-laws, and I know how big a decision it is for families to make. Okay. So we know directly from a very significant number of families, from a number of different inputs. But when things go wrong, it is important that we take stock and that we look at the regulatory changes and also the changes in how we do it.
I just find it hard to believe that, you know, anybody could have confidence after 20 years of HIQA being in operation that something like this would still happen. It's very hard for me to understand. Okay, I'm going to move on to my next question, if you don't mind. So it was reported in the media that an IT project is running behind schedule. Could you just let me know how much that IT project has cost?
So we, as the CNAG said at the start of the meeting, we have been approved for a significant digital transformation project to our regulatory system. And
so how much is that?
The total cost of it is 8.6.
8.6, and is it in operation?
We're moving towards implementation now. We have the foundation built and tested. It works. We're working entirely within the budget. It is a fixed price contract. We have very strong internal controls. We've had delay, where we've had to invoke some of the levers within our legal framework to drive performance, but we now have a solution.
Yeah. So what's the date for that?
We're moving towards implementation on a phase basis, starting this year, later this year in healthcare, which is a very starting from quite a low base from a technical solution, and in children's services, and we'll be moving towards extending that into next year and the year beyond.
Do you have confidence it'll be working?
Yes, we've the foundations tested. The regression testing, which is a very specific test, shows that the system has worked, and we've had a strong engagement with the provider to drive performance. And as I say,
who is the provider?
The provider is Kodak.
Kodak. And have you discussed Kodak, the use of Kodak, with DEEPR or with the Office of Government Procurement? Did they recommend Kodak to you, or where did
we went?
We had a competitive dialogue process that we ran about 2-3 years ago. So where we dealt with, we set out what our specifications were and went to the market with that, and through.
Who told you what you needed exactly? Did you request help from DEEPR or from anybody else to ensure that you were getting the right IT system?
Before we signed the contract, we had to make a business case to the Department of Health and the Office of the Government Chief Information Officer. So we set out in very specific detail what our requirements were and how we wanted to meet those through a software system.
Do you have full confidence that this system is going to be fully operational starting this year? Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that what we said? Okay, I'm happy with that. So hopefully then next year, if we have you back in again, that'll be fully operational, and that money is being put to good use, 8.6 million on an IT system.
And we have not paid anything in excess of the approved amount to the vendor in respect to the project, because we've used the levers within a fixed price contract to deliver performance. Okay, because it was reported in the media that it was just running well behind schedule, so it's not, it's actually. It is running behind schedule because it has been a challenging project, and part of.
Sorry, it's behind schedule, certainly time-wise.
Yeah.
Okay. When was it supposed to be operational?
We're about just over 12 months behind where we should have been.
12 months, and you're telling me today that it's going to be operational from...
We're expecting the initial parts of the system to be going live before the end of the year.
Okay. Okay, just my last question, just in relation to your income and expenditure. In 2009, you had an income of, or an expenditure of just 24 million, but in 2023, I think that's increased to about 39 million, is that correct, or 30? So I'm just wondering, why is there such a difference there in the income and expenditure that, you know, that in those years, or why is there so much more money spent?
Well, it'll be driven primarily by head count. So we've had a significant increase in the number of staff employed in the organisation.
So you had more staff in those years, yeah?
Yes.
So we've had an 11% increase between 22 and 23 in our funded allocation. As we've set out in the opening statement, there are 3 sources of funding. We get the block grant from the Department of Health. We also get fee income. And then we have funding for specific other projects, including funding for IPAS. And the 11% increase in funding is directly related to the departments, both departments' requests to us to take on significantly expanded remit, and that has continued into 24.
Yeah. Okay, just under the income, the nursing home expert panel grant and the international protection accommodations grant. They're both, do you still receive those?
Yes.
So the nursing home expert panel grant, it was specifically for COVID-19. Why would you still receive that?
So that's out with the decisions around the continuation of that are made out with ourselves. But what I can tell you is how it's being deployed. So as a result of COVID, we engaged with the department in terms of specific requirements that would enhance our regulatory role coming out of COVID. And one of those was in relation to inspection. And as was set out in the more detailed opening statement, we were mandated to do 2 inspections over a 3-year period. What the COVID, the expert panel funding allowed us to do was to increase that to 1 inspection a year. And in practice, about 40% of our nursing homes are inspected at least twice, and many of them far more. So it gave a much more stable funding base to allow us to extend our regulatory lens in those areas. The other piece that was funded, Deputy, is there was a request to look at extending the Care Experience Programme, which is a collaboration between 3 organisations, and we looked at the end of life survey, which was very relevant, obviously, in the context of COVID. So that survey is funded from that source.
Perhaps that might be something other members take up. Deputy Gagan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for attending. Ms Fitzgerald, you mentioned there your own experience of care with your parents and your in-laws, and you did the same in the Health Committee, yes. Presumably to demonstrate you're a real person, you have empathy, you have a level of understanding. Would you be happy to have any of your loved ones in an MES Ireland run nursing home right now?
So I think the first thing is, for me, when I made the choice to look at anywhere, you look at what are we saying about it? So that is an important piece. You also look at your own requirements in terms of your loved one. What I can say is that in the 2 nursing homes in question, they have a lot of work to do. They have restrictions on the missions. They have a very strong compliance requirement coming out of a compliance plan. And they have significant work to assure us that they have the necessary management, leadership, and capabilities, and we're not satisfied yet.
So you wouldn't put your loved ones in those 2 nursing homes. Of the 23 other nursing homes that EMEA Ireland currently operate, am I right in saying that HIQA have taken a decision not to allow any further entrance into those total 25 nursing homes that EMEA Ireland run?
So at the moment, that decision was taken by EMEA itself. In discussion with us. As you know, Deputy, we have no regulatory role vis-a-vis EMEA as an entity. We do have with each of the individual providers, but through discussion with the Chief Inspector and the Deputy Chief Inspector, they took that decision. We are in a programme of inspection by agreement with the Minister, and we will make a separate and independent decision about whether that restriction should remain in some or all of them. I think it is also important to say that I did go to the 2 nursing homes in question and met with a very significant number of residents and their families. And particularly, spoke at length with residents who were able to talk to us about their own experience. And notwithstanding what we saw, and not in any way trying to minimise what we saw, a number of residents who had the capability were well able to tell us their direct experience, and many of them had very good experiences, as had their families. So we do have to tackle what we saw, but we also have to acknowledge that some aspects of care were and continue to be good.
But as matters stand, in terms of the group, I hear what you're saying in
Yes.
kind of a regulatory sense.
Yes.
But obviously, this brand, this group has suffered enormous damage to its brand and its credibility and its trust. Would you be confident having any of your loved ones right now in a nursing home that's within the MES Ireland group? That's just a question to you that I'm asking. I think you sort of said, I wouldn't be happy with having my loved ones in the 2 nursing homes that were the subject of the prime time investigation. Am I right? You did say that.
No, I think what I said was that the 2 nursing homes in question have significant work to do to assure HIQA that they can meet the standards consistently. I think I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on every single one of the other nursing homes because we're in a programme of inspection on them.
Yeah, but you're at a public accounts committee now. You're in a public committee. You know, the public out there just want to know, you guys are the regulators.
Yeah.
If you guys aren't satisfied to put your loved ones in an MES Ireland run nursing home, how can the public be satisfied that they can safely put their loved one in an MES Ireland run nursing home? It's a fairly simple question, and I just want to know, would you be satisfied putting your loved one in everything that you now know, and you guys have better information than anyone else does here, would you be satisfied to put your loved one in an MES Ireland run nursing home?
Yeah. What I think if we want to talk about MES, I think what I can say about MES is that in my direct engagement with them and in our direct engagement as a regulatory team, they have demonstrated a strong commitment to address the issues, and they've demonstrated that by taking the necessary actions which were not imposed on them. I think what we can say is that we see very significant challenges in terms of maintaining the management and other capabilities in 2 of the nursing homes, and we have in the process of looking at a number of other ones, and we will be happy to provide a comprehensive report to the Minister on our overall assessment when that work is done. So I think we have an obligation to the nursing homes concerned to be fair to them and not to preempt that.
You said at the Health Committee that the first time you saw the footage of what took place in the Prime Time Investigates programme was in fact when the programme aired. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to be personal about this, but where did you watch that programme as a matter of interest?
I watched it at home.
You're watching at home. And when you were sitting on the couch watching it at home, could you just give us a sense of, like, how did you, I'm not trying to put personal accountability on you, but I just want to understand, you're the top of this organisation. How did you personally feel watching that? Leaving aside all the legalese and the regulatory structures, you mentioned your in-laws and your parents. Like, how did you personally feel watching that?
I can tell you very honestly, Deputy, because myself and Finbar had extensive engagement during the programme and afterwards, I was shocked and appalled and felt let down by the provider in terms of what I witnessed. I also felt deeply saddened that staff hadn't got the skills and the experience and the insight to see what they should do. And for me, as the regulator, I do feel a sense of accountability. It's why I'm here today. And I am saying that we do have to look at, in addition to what we witnessed, you talked earlier on about the levers. It is important that we have regulatory levers. It is also important that there are standards in relation to minimum staffing. It's also important that we look at what we can do between inspections, going back to Deputy Bennett's comments about looking between inspections at what we can do. There are a number of things to be done, but at a human level, I was shocked and appalled.
And had you ever seen anything worse?
No.
So in your entire time
in the sense that I hadn't seen the type of behaviours, and I think my colleagues as inspectors would never have witnessed the behaviours there. But we've said earlier on that the type of behaviours that were witnessed on the programme are linked to specific lack of understanding and a lack of insight in terms of culture.
But you can probably then understand out there in the public, if you're a child or a partner of a loved one and you're making difficult decisions and you're looking at nursing homes in the area that you're living in and you learn that one of them is an MES Ireland run nursing home, you've watched the programme, you can understand the fear that they might have of putting them in an EMEAS Ireland run nursing home, having watched that programme.
I think it's fair to say that everybody who has a loved one in a nursing home.
No, but no. This is very specific to EMEAS Ireland, the RT programme, the worst thing you've ever seen as the head of HIQA. You've just said that. You know, how would they feel? You know, you can understand the fear that they would have.
I think we can all understand that fear. I think that's well established. I think what we have to be fair is there are 23 individual providers who are part of the EMEAS group, and I think they are being subject to a programme of inspection, and each of those will be evaluated. And I think then we're in a position to say what's required. That doesn't mean that people can't have a view right now based on their own experience of what they've witnessed. But I think we do need to be, as a regulator, we have often been challenged for taking decisions in relation to closures of nursing homes in specific areas. We do have to be proportionate here. So I think it is very appropriate that I give a human response, because I am a human, but it is also important as the regulator to give a proportionate response, which is to say that we have a job of work to do and there is a programme of work underway. We've agreed to give that report to the Minister. We're giving him the reports as we continue them, and that will inform appropriate regulatory action. And maybe Finbar might.
But isn't the problem here that the inspections regime in relation to these two nursing homes that were the subject of the Primetime Investigates programme fundamentally and catastrophically failed to such an extent that the actions that you witnessed, you just said it, in the TV programme, was some of the worst things you've ever seen. And notwithstanding the regulatory regime that we've had in place, it catastrophically failed those patients who were subjected to abuse, those residents who were subjected to abuse, and it's called into question the entire inspector regime that HIQA operate and whether it is fit for purpose or not. Do you accept that that is the natural consequence of the RT Primetime Investigates programme?
I accept that when something that we've witnessed demands a response, I've already outlined what that response is. We've agreed with government and with the Minister what we are doing, which is three things. We are looking at what needs to change in the policy and regulatory framework, what action needs to be taken in relation to each of the nursing homes under that group, and that's underway. And also then, what changes would enhance our ability, both in terms of inspection and out with inspections, to do our job.
And do you think, are your inspectors good enough? Are they sufficiently qualified to do what they're supposed to do? I don't know, what are the qualifications? Do they all have nursing qualifications, gerontology qualifications? Have you looked at that? I'm just asking you, Ms Fitzgerald. Yeah. Is this an issue that you've looked at in terms of your actual inspectors, the people who carry out the inspections?
I am very satisfied that our inspectors are of the very highest calibre. They all come from very significant clinical...
So we're not changing that in terms of the inspectors?
No.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for being here this morning. It's been very informative so far to have both your opening statements and also the contributions to this point, so I appreciate it. Mr. Coffer, I'm going to go to you at the start, if that's okay. Do I understand it right? So you in your role have powers of prosecution?
Yes, we do. We have powers of prosecution.
You do in your role?
Yeah.
And given we've shared experiences and reflections on these MES properties, why are those two properties still open?
We haven't finalised our decisions in relation to any of the recent events yet, Deputy. So we are looking at the information available to us. We've engaged with RTE to get coverage, to get their video coverage, so we can review that. So we're still in a process of
There's still potential that those properties could close.
What actions is appropriate and can be taken.
And how many MES sites have HIQA visited since the airing of the RT documentary?
How many
sites, MES sites?
AMIS.
How many? Sorry.
Many AMIS sites.
AMIS sites have we visited?
Yeah.
We have inspected, there are 25 in total we've inspected. Since the programme, we've inspected 16 of them.
Okay.
And we're in the process of issuing our findings to the provider. The provider, under the Act, have 21 days to come back and correct any factual inaccuracies or challenges on our findings. But we have, and we have a programme of work to visit the rest of them currently, which is very active.
And if I could just keep going on Deputy Gagan's point with regards to the calibre of the inspectors. I have a query about the nature of those inspections. How many nighttime inspections would HIQA complete? With a percentage, let's say roughly?
Yeah, in general, our framework allows for daytime inspections. However, where we have information of concern, we do undertake out-of-hours inspections. So in 2024, I think it's 24% of our inspections were out-of-hours inspections. So we do. It is one of the questions that we are asking, are examining ourselves in relation to perhaps a more scheduled approach to 24/7 type of inspection. We're very conscious that health services are operating on 24/7 basis.
And that 24% of the out of hours, would they have all been unplanned? They wouldn't have got notification that we will visit you at 9 p.m, 10 p.m. They would have all been unplanned.
They were all
based on foot of a concern.
Yeah, normally when we have an out of hours inspection, it's because we've received information and we want to go out and check against that information.
And that information will come from potentially a resident's family, or would it have to be from the
or statutory notifications that the provider has made to us that we're concerned about.
And the idea that, just looking at the 2023 accounts, could you elaborate a little bit on what appears to me to be a real reliance on agency staff? Average €1 million a year over the last 10 years on agency staff. Are they specifically investigators? Are they? So who are the agency staff?
So we have currently 450 staff, and on average at any one time we would have about 15 staff on agency. Just to say that for the Chief Inspector and for inspectors, we're actually precluded under law in using anyone other than a permanent employee, so no inspectors are employed on an agency basis. But like all organisations, where we have short-term absences in critical functions, typically in operational areas like payroll or in areas where you've got continuity, we use agency for short-term absences. We had an unplanned absence in the whole area of risk, for example, where somebody for personal reasons had to take a few months out. It would be very difficult to recruit somebody for that piece. We provide for that in how we do it. We do that. We work with our government department. We absolutely operate within our approved envelope, but our reliance on agency is about 3% of the workforce, and we seek to drive that down. We would like not to have it, but there will always be short-term absences that arise where it gives rise to agency. Our staff are senior. You asked that question earlier on. We have senior staff, so the agency cost will be commensurate with the fact that we're looking for senior staff on a short-term basis.
But there must, if it's averaging out at that every year for 10 years, there must be trends in that would be better served to recoup, let's say, if a request went for a permanent position in that role, as opposed to, 1 year being 900,000, the next year being 1,200. It's a trend as opposed to one-off.
Well, I think everybody, public sector and private, will have short-term absences for either parental leave, unpaid leave, maternity leave, and there can be, particularly where there is short-term absence. I've given one example recently. So we provide for that, but we seek to try and keep it at a minimum. Our desire would be to maintain expertise and maintain continuity. And for example, if we're in the middle of a project where continuity in that project is essential, it may be that we would support that project. For example, in the CHI review, where we would have used our own staff, there would have been an administrative piece that may have been additional, and rather than displacing someone, we would use it for a period. Okay. So they're very much short term, but you will have that every year. And as I say, on a base of 450 staff, it's somewhere between 3 and 4%.
And in talking about that expertise, to what extent does HIQA have paid staff on the payroll with regards to ICT expertise?
So we have 3 types of arrangements for ICT. We have permanent staff, and we have a small team of staff. We have about 20 staff. We also have, like most public sector organisations, we have a help desk support function. And that typically is outsourced because we wouldn't have that expertise, we wouldn't be able to recruit that expertise. And that runs on a 24/7 basis. And then for specific projects which we're doing under our digital strategy, we would buy in expertise because we simply wouldn't have that. And that is essential because in terms of being able to manage external contractors and hold them to account, having that expertise available to us. So we use it very wisely. We work very closely with the department in the use of it, and we seek to keep it for a minimum. We have seen, deputies, some changes in the market and arrangements. We've seized that opportunity. So, for example, a recent competition where 18 months ago we wouldn't have got a candidate. We had 97 applicants. So where we can, we seek to recruit people. We want to build that capability. We're in discussions with government at the moment about taking on a role as the competent authority for cyber security. So having that capability available to us is really important. But we also recognise the public sector rates won't always allow us to buy it at the level we need.
Yeah, I accept that. With that assertion then, Ms Fitzgerald, do you think that the market has changed? Are we likely to see less? So looking at the purchase orders from 2023, the ICT/consultant,
Yeah. So
there's 55 incidents of purchase orders for ICT or consultancy services in a 12-month period.
And some of those consultancy services, Deputy, would be for contractors who are delivering programmes of work. We talked about the digital strategy earlier on. In the 5 years of that, we've delivered over 100 projects that actually support the infrastructure in terms of keeping the lights on in technical terms, ensuring that systems talk to each other and leveraging those systems from a cyber security point of view. A lot of those purchase orders relate to, we've 24-hour surveillance for cyber security, that they're in that space. But I agree with you, Deputy, that it's important that you have the internal capability, and with the support of the department, we're looking to repatriate some of that cost back into our core budget.
So you're being proactive in that.
Yes.
We acknowledge that it just doesn't seem to be sustainable to outsource, and the diversity of it, because there's so many different companies and bodies doing what appears to be, I know in a very simplistic form, similar work.
Yeah.
Is there any potential conflicts of interest, do you believe, in the organisations and companies that you're hiring in? Everything's going through appropriate procurement.
Yes.
So if there's former board members, former board representatives that are now members of these companies, there's nothing to be concerned about with regards to that.
We have a conflicts of interest policy ourselves, but also through our procurement process, we're obliged to look at that. And any companies that we take on also are bound by conflicts of interest themselves. So, for example, for our legal services, where we procure a legal service, they have to declare for each project that we're doing or every initiative that we're doing that there may be a conflict for them. So there's obligations on them and obligations on us.
So when there's been a former board chair that is part of a company that's been part of these consultancy services, they are going through a transparent process.
Yes.
Oh, completely. I mean, every item you'll have instanced there will have gone through a competitive procurement process, and as part of that there will have been we would have sought any kind of declarations of conflicts of interest as part of that, so they would have been identified and dealt with as part of the competitive procurement process.
Thanks for your time.
Deputy Dolan.
Look, I guess firstly at the outset, thank you for being here today. HIQA has an incredibly important role in our society. It protects all of our loved ones, or it's supposed to at least. One of the main things is that I think coming out of here today, I hope HIQA goes out with a renewed vigour to ensure the safety and the highest standards across our nursing home sector, across all health service providers. I think HIQA as an entity and as an organisation has huge potential, but I think we have to have a serious conversation today about what has happened, what has come to light, and where we're going from there. I actually just want to pick up on Deputy Farrelly's point. Looking at the purchase orders, there was over 500,000 euros in 2024 alone paid on ICT contracts to a company whose managing director was the former chair of HIQA between 2013 and 2018. Are you aware of that relationship that exists between that company and the managing director being the former chair of HIQA?
We are, yeah.
And do you believe that's an acceptable level of risk, or do you believe that relationship is too close?
Well, I mean, 2018 is a long time ago, Deputy, so that procurement, the services that you've referred to, which are mainly in the area of cybersecurity, would have been procured many years after that gentleman resigned from the chair of HIQA. So there's a long period since then.
And was there a was there a conflict of interest declared, given that that person may have had close relationships with people who were still in HIQA from the time of when he was chair?
I can't say I wasn't involved in the procurement process.
Prior to my time, but I think Deputy, we would be very, we work very closely with the Office of Procurement in carrying out any any appointments for procurement. I'm not aware of any relationship. It's a very specialist area. It's cyber surveillance, and it was done through a competitive process. I'm not aware of any relationships, current or prior to that, and I have absolutely no relationship.
I know it's just you can imagine for the public to hear that the former chair of HIQA is the managing director of a company that now makes, hundreds of thousands a year providing ICT services to HIQA. People need reassurance that there's no close relationship here, and that there is every accountability measure in place.
None of us on the executive has any relationship, and I don't actually know the gentleman at all.
Okay.
So there's no relationship. But I do know that the BDO service, because I think it's BDO you're speaking about, has been essential for us. They have a 24-hour surveillance service that actually has picked up a number of potential threats to us, and it was done through an entirely open process.
Okay, so are you proud of your procurement track record?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, if you've looked at our accounts, we're like all state bodies. We have an obligation to publish any non-compliance with procurement regulations. There were none identified in 2013. There were no issues picked up by the CNAG in that year. Sorry, 2023. No issues picked up by the CNAG that year, and we also had internal audits of procurement.
So the reason I ask that is because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at the description of the purchase orders and the numbers of purchase orders from top to bottom over your entity. And there was 8 purchase orders, and the description was mobile phone charges of over 512,000 euros. I just wanted to check that that's correct, and over what time period that would have been.
It doesn't sound correct. I have a breakdown somewhere of the actual cost that we ended up spending on telecoms. But look, all I can assure you is, I've actually, because we have published our telephone costs in the statutory accounts under the note on support costs, and that comes at 196,000 in total.
That's for that set of financial accounts, is it?
The set of statutory accounts.
Okay.
And the breakdown of that mobile costs for the year, and this is for the full staff, is 115,000. So not insignificant, but obviously not anywhere like that number.
Yeah. There's a big concern out there that, in the constituency I represent, there's a lot of smaller nursing homes, maybe a family-owned business, and they take huge pride in the work that they do. And there's a big concern that, if a smaller provider put one foot out a step, HIQA would be down on top of them, making sure that everything is compliant, and they'd have recommendations for them, there'd be a report, there'd be an inspection. But yet then, there's over 200 complaints made about Benevan Manor, and there wasn't a statutory investigation initiated before the RTE expose. Because I can only imagine, if there was one complaint about a small nursing home down the country, HIQA would be down on top of them. And now 200 complaints and no action.
Okay.
How do we...
Susan, would you like to?
So we have one assessment judgment framework. We have one set of care and welfare regulations, and we have one set of registration regulations. They're applied regardless of whether a registered provider is public, private, voluntary, whether there's 185 beds, 120 beds or 20 beds. The same regulatory framework is applied across the board. When our inspectors arrive to inspect a nursing home, it is immaterial what the provenance of that provider is, whether they're public, private or voluntary. So
Do inspectors choose which inspections they take?
each inspector has a caseload and they're responsible for ensuring that that centre...
So if I'm an inspector, is it easier for me to go and inspect the small nursing home where there's 1 or 2 complaints over going to the nursing home where there's 200 complaints? And do the caseloads where there's 200 complaints get left to last because they know it's going to be the hardest work?
No. Each nursing home is inspected according with the requirement to inspect at a minimum once a year, to do an announced inspection once every 3 years, and in response to risk. So, for example, there was one nursing home last year that was inspected 9 times in response to the level of risk that was either reported, notified, or we were aware of. So it doesn't matter. There is not a different framework for nursing homes that operate under the umbrella of a group, as a standalone provider, or under an organisation as big as the HSE. It is
Can I ask, Susan, who decides? Is it HIQA or is it the Chief Inspectorate that decides when you're going to prosecute or pursue legal action?
That decision rests within the Office of the Chief Inspector.
Okay, and just in the Office of the Chief Inspector then, if you decide that you are going to pursue an entity or pursue an organisation, do you use the Chief State Solicitor or do you use external legal firms?
No, we have internal legal advisors and they will decide then whether we need to go and sustain extra external legal expertise as well.
And I guess in the last few years, who would have been your go-to legal advisor that would have done the most work for you?
Our go-to legal advisor for the Office of the Chief Inspector would have been a company called Beecham's.
Okay. And then for HIQA, who would be the chief sort of legal firm that you go to?
So we procure, our legal services are procured for HIQA. So we now have 2 firms of legal firms. We can speak to that separately, but it's through a national procurement process.
So
Just the name of the firm?
Just to clarify, the contract with Beecham's ended partway through last year. We went back out to the market and we procured 2 other providers.
Just who's the largest provider at the moment?
So we have 2 providers. They provide separate arrangements. We have Mason Hayes Curran and we have Byrne Wallace.
And would I be correct in saying, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is Mason Hayes Curran not also advising MES?
I can't confirm that, but what I can say is that for example, most of
There was media reports in the past 12 months that would have confirmed that there's a relationship between Mason Hayes and Curran and MES, and now they're the biggest legal advisors for HIQA. And we haven't seen any prosecution over MES yet.
So
I don't want to think that HIQA has the same legal advisors as MES, and that at least if we have separate legal advisors, there's no cross communication. I just want to make sure of that.
So Deputy, previously we had a single firm of advisors. We now have 2 firms of advisors. And as I said,
when did you get the second firm?
We got the 2 firms in response to a recent procurement process.
Last autumn.
Last autumn. So. And so what I would say, Deputy, is that...
Can you confirm HIQA's independence legally from MES?
Yes, absolutely.
How can you confirm that?
So if we were taking
You go in
action...
your overtime.
I know,
So
thank you,
if
Claire.
we were
That's my
taking
last question.
action, if we were taking action, Mason Hayes Curran will be obliged to, formally, they're obliged under their own rules to declare a conflict. And if that conflict was declared, they would not be involved.
But I assume you would only take action off the back of their advice.
No, we actually have our own internal legal advice. Most of our advice is framed by our own legal, we have 4 legal advisors.
Thank you.
Deputy Dole, Deputy Darda.
Thank you very much. And obviously we know HIQA was established in 2007 to ensure service providers across residential settings live in dignity, in a clean and safe environment with purpose, and live in a high quality. And I suppose the most important people in the picture are the service providers across the country, who you serve, who we serve. Just following on from my colleague in relation to the failure to prosecute, why have no prosecutions been brought? I know you can only prosecute summarily in the district court, you can't issue fines, but it seems like, and maybe you might be able to tell me how many prosecutions you have brought in the last 12 months against individuals or nursing homes using your limited powers.
Yeah, I believe it's 2 in the nursing home.
In the last 12 months, we haven't prosecuted any registered provider. Where we have situations of serious concern about the care and welfare of residents, we'll go straight to the cancellation of the registration of the nursing home. If we were to issue prosecution proceedings against a provider, we potentially would be allowing the situation in the nursing home to continue while that prosecution is going through the courts. Whereas if we are so concerned about the care and welfare of the residents, then the appropriate action is to cancel the registration, or to take one of the lesser regulatory actions, such as maybe attaching a condition to stop admissions to the centre, or attaching a condition to require them to have something in place in the designated centre. So our focus, the most important people in the picture are the residents in the nursing homes, and our focus must always be on what's going to affect the quickest change and ensure that they're safe and get the care that they deserve to receive.
I just want to know, there's nothing stopping you both prosecuting and cancelling a registration, is that correct?
The legal advice would be, it would be very difficult to secure a prosecution.
Does the law allow you do both at the same time, simultaneously?
Technically it does, I guess.
Thank you.
The legal advice is that it would be difficult to secure prosecution when the registration had been cancelled, as the law is grounded in a registered provider, and if the registration was cancelled, they'd no longer be a registered provider.
In the UK, the Care Quality Commission allows, sort of like your brother in the UK, allows their organisation to impose fines and also to prosecute at a higher level, either the circuit or High Court equivalent. Do you feel that there are legislative gaps in your suite of available prosecutions that you might be able to, or from what you're saying, you seem quite reticent in even using the summary suite of prosecutions that you're allowed? So, like,
I might take that one.
yeah.
We have, just to assure the deputy, we have actually taken prosecutions. Prosecutions are a very resource-heavy action, and the result of those prosecutions that we have taken have been a very low level of sanction.
So there's been no prosecutions in the last 12 months. What prosecutions are you referring to?
Not in the nursing homes, but within the disability sector.
Is this in the last 12 months or previous
in the last
to that?
12 months, yeah. So we do look at the possibility of prosecution. We weigh up how to effect change as quickly as possible. Our experience with prosecution is that it's a very heavy resource dependent, and the outcome for the ones that we've taken has been quite low. In terms then of, sorry, can you repeat that last question?
I suppose I was asking you how many prosecutions you have. Would you think you would like to be able to access
sanctions?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah,
no,
so,
fines as well.
Yeah.
Would you like to be able to offer to impose fines on?
Yeah. We're very open to looking at any kind of levers that we can bring in to help us affect change more effectively, and we're having discussions at the moment about various options, including fines, the possibility of fines. They're at discussions phase at the moment, but certainly we're willing to look at
And how soon do you think you might be able to be in a position to, how far away is that legislation, do you believe?
Well, I think, I don't think we can give a time frame on that. We're happy to engage in the discussions.
It's something that you formally asked for of the Minister?
I think in the discussions with the Minister, with both Ministers, we looked at the recent regulatory changes and the impact they will have, and they certainly will have some impact on some of the issues today. We've looked at additional measures, and they fall into two main categories. One is the
Do you mind if I just continue on my question?
Oh, sure,
I
yeah.
have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Sorry, of course.
Just in relation to the use of CCTV, I know the Care Quality Commission in the UK has expressed their view that more widespread use of CCTV will obviously protect care residential users, service providers. I'm just wondering, and obviously a lot, as my friends have said, that a lot of, I suppose, drop in care levels happen at night time. And that's why we need more inspections, I suppose, that are unannounced during out-of-hours times. And I suppose that's when CCTV comes into play very much so. So what's your role on ensuring that all residential settings, not just large residential settings, but all, even including small residential settings, are mandated to have CCTV that is accessible? I know there's a thought in the UK that this type of legislation will be coming down the road.
The CCTV issue is not a simple one. Even if you look at the TV programme, the RTE TV programme, a lot of what happened was behind the bedroom door, and you'll never have CCTV in bedrooms. We have...
I think in the UK they are looking at that, especially when you come to really vulnerable, children and adults, that you would have CCTV in those situations, because that's where people are being cared for intimately, and that's where people, families have probably the most concerns, especially if you have a vulnerable child or a really vulnerable adult.
I think we have seen situations where there has a small number of situations where CCTV has been used in different services. We would look for a very high level of evidence that that's necessary and that other options have been looked at. At this point, we're not supporting the widespread blanket use of CCTV. There are issues in terms of people's right to privacy, and I think those issues need to be teased out before we would ever sanction that there will be a widespread use. But I do think there's a more important point in what you're making, Deputy, and that's about the culture of a service.
I'm going to stop you there. I don't mean to be rude. I only have a very limited amount of time. How many children's residential centres have had their registration cancelled or conditions attached in the last 5 years?
We haven't cancelled any children's...
have you attached conditions?
No, not to my I don't believe we have.
Have you made any complaints?
There are only, just to clarify, while there's over 200 children's residential centres, we don't regulate those, so we inspect and monitor against standards. We don't have regulations for those centres. There are 3 children's secure units, and we do regulate those, and they are registered.
Okay. And tell me, what is your policy then for follow-up inspections when there is non-compliance in any of your care facilities? Do you feed in, say for instance, you either go to refer a matter to the HSE2 or the Garda Síochána? Do you have a loop back from them? Is there timelines for that?
So in terms of any issues we might identify on
from inspection.
After inspection, we make our referrals. Generally speaking, the other authorities or bodies don't come back to us, but we follow up on the issues themselves through follow-up action and through follow-up inspections. So, for example, if there is an issue around adult safeguarding, and we've made a referral to the safeguarding team or to Garda Síochána, Garda Síochána don't come back to us or report back to us, but we will follow up on the actions that the provider has taken to keep people safe from that action.
Okay, so if you have made a referral and to Garda Síochána and you haven't attached any conditions or cancellations, how do you ensure that those service providers are actually not left in an unsafe setting?
So I suppose we have a number of measures that we do use. So if inspectors identify an issue on inspection, we'll require the provider to take immediate action. And generally speaking, our inspectors won't leave until that action has been taken. A further action we can have is require a provider to set out the ongoing actions to ensure that person is safe and to submit that to us. We will go back. If there's risk, we will go back and do a follow-up inspection to confirm that the provider has taken those actions. So you'll see some centres where we have gone back multiple times. Susan mentioned
Can I just,
one.
a final question. How many times have you inspected the MES Ireland homes since the airing of the programme?
Susan might be able to give more specific information on that.
2 of the 25 nursing homes that operate under MES Ireland have been inspected since the prime time or the RTA Investigates programme, with plans in place for the remaining 3. And of those, 1 of them has been inspected a second time already.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Burton.
And many thanks for you all for joining us here today. I think it's fair to say HIQA have been before Oireachtas committees several times in recent years, and it's unfortunate it's the same issues that keep arising again and again. With that in mind, I might tease out some of your frameworks for measuring your performance, if that's okay. Just in relation to compliance notices, and do you have a figure on how many you've issued in recent years, and what is the rate of measured compliance afterwards? Like, how do you measure that on each one?
So I'll ask Finbar and Susan to come in on the specifics, but just to say the legal compliance notices were used administratively. We required people to put compliance plans in place, but the legal basis for that has actually only been commenced since the end of February. So, but prior to that, in the absence of having a legal lever, we actually issued at the end of every inspection a compliance plan and an improvement requirement. But maybe Finbar or Susan might want to come in on the specifics.
Yeah, I might just make a distinction between a compliance plan and a compliance notice. A compliance plan, we have always required providers to respond to areas of non-compliance, and we publish our compliance levels in our annual reports each year. But a compliance notice is a new power that has been just given to us, and we're in the process of implementing that. We had an administrative process, and I mentioned when I was responding to Deputy Arda, we have an administrative process where we require a provider to take immediate action or urgent action.
How do you measure what action the provider is taking, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get at. How do you set the bar, and how do you measure that they are meeting the bar?
So in relation to immediate or urgent action, we require the provider to demonstrate immediate action, and we don't, either we won't leave the centre, or within a few days we require evidence that it has been taken. In regard to compliance plans, providers set out how they're going to address compliance plans after the inspection. We then review those on the next inspection to confirm whether they have been implemented or not.
Okay, thank you for that. And in relation to closures, I think my colleague Deputy Bennett asked this question earlier on, and you outlined some figures: 2 in 2020, 3 in 2021, 1 in 2022, 3 in 2023. 10 notices issued in 24, but 7 closed, and 1 closure in 2025 to date. So that's 17 closures in 5 years. Am I right on that? Are any of them 17 of the same operator?
In most cases, I might hand to Susan, who'll have the specific information on those.
In the closures that would have happened from late 2023 to early 2025, there is a common trend, not in the named provider, because each were operated by, the majority of them were operated by individual companies. A significant number of them set under the umbrella group known as the APRI group. There was another 2 centres that were owned and operated by the same provider that were they had their registration cancelled. And then the remaining 2 were owned and operated by different registered providers comprised of the same directors.
Okay, so there is, within that common thread, is there additional monitoring taken by HIQA then to specifically look at those that fall under that common thread umbrella?
Yes.
And any other centres that they may operate that haven't gone as far as closures?
Yeah.
And
We have
what
a
are the
system to
parameters?
share the learning from individual inspections. We don't go out expecting to see that because one thing is happening in one nursing home, it's happening in another, but we're awake to the possibility that it may be. And we have a process through our regional management structure to share learning from inspections of different nursing homes. And it may not just be, private providers, it could be the statutory provider, or it could just be a trend in the sector. And we have processes for sharing that information internally.
That's very positive that you've identified that and you're aware of that, and I'm really, really pleased to hear that you're working on that. Just in relation to the MES managed properties, there was a bit of conflicting information there. It was said on 2 occasions that 25, there's 25 of these in operation, but one said 16 have been inspected since the RTE programme, and Susan, you mentioned 22.
22 as of yesterday evening. So when the data was pulled initially, it was 16, but there was a further number of inspections completed yesterday evening. So as of yesterday evening, that number is now 22.
Okay, and only one of them has had to be inspected a second time?
Only one of them has been inspected a second time so far.
Okay, and how many times does something have to be inspected before action is red flagged, should I say, or that it elevates to the next level of concern?
Depends on the issue that's identified.
Okay.
So, and that's all grounded in our assessment of the risk to individual residents in the centre. So if we're really not satisfied, and if it's a repeat finding over repeat inspections, we will afford providers an opportunity to address issues are identified, and expect that they will do it, because the vast majority of the sector will. But if we go out and it hasn't been addressed, well then obviously we have an increasing concern, and the time frame to make the changes will be shorter. And we will then move into our escalating regulatory action. We'll have enforcement action in the form of conditions, and that will bring a shorter window. Like I said, one centre last year was inspected 9 times. That is very unusual, and it's really important that we recognise the vast majority of the sector take action on foot of the findings of inspection and are starting the work as the inspectors are going out the doors.
Okay. And in relation to the inspectors inspecting the properties, I understand it was mentioned earlier that each inspector has a caseload. Is the caseload rotated, or is it the same inspectors? So the same inspectors aren't inspecting the same properties?
We have a process of changing over about 25% of centres per inspector per year.
Okay.
So we try and avoid that situation, both for the inspector and for the registered provider, because if you're going in the door, you stop seeing the same things. But equally, the growth in the size of the team over the last 3 years on foot of the expert panel review meant we went from 4 to 5 to 6 regions, and that necessitated casehold changings as well. So all of that contributed to the changes.
No problem. If I may, I'm just going to draw attention to HIQA's vision, strategic mission and values, and the first line of that states that you will work to promote human rights, as well as identifying, challenging and reporting on breaches of rights in health and social care services. I suppose given the recent revelations in the RTE programme, does HIQA still stand over that vision? And I know that's a very hard question to put to you, but it's something people are asking.
I think it's a fair question, Deputy. I think it actually underlines the importance of reinforcing that is our mission. I think certainly my predecessor, and from the start, the inception of HIQA, one of the things we have driven is that focus on human rights, because it is important to say that regulation provides kind of a minimum compliance. What we've tried to do is move people towards a system where they're doing it because it's the right thing to do, rather than because we're inspecting. And I think that's an important point to make, that if the system of delivery of care becomes dependent on an inspector coming in and shining a light, well then we will always have people doing things because somebody else is telling them to do it. What we're trying to do is get the system to do it because it's the right thing to do. And I would have to say that in the time that I've been here, I've been at many provider events, many events which mark particular landmarks. And what I've been struck by is the commitment of the vast majority of providers to deliver good care. But I think it's a fair challenge to put to us. I think we have been challenged by the events, and we do have to make sure that continues to be amplified by the work we do, by the training we do, by the learning events, by the learning events we promote with our own staff. We do a reflective practice event every year with all of the regulatory team where we go off-site and we challenge ourselves to look at where we could do better. We also do that with the provider system. I was at an event recently where all of the providers there, and many of those would have had challenges with us, but I think we've moved to there's always been a tension, can you be collaborative as a regulator? And we believe you can. But I do think it's a fair question you've put to us, and I think it amplifies the importance for us to do the learning we're looking at for ourselves.
Appreciate that. And if I may, do you feel you've lost the trust of the public, particularly since the airing of the
I think people
documentary?
will feel that there's a dent in the armour in terms of we were the trusted voice. We'd like to believe that our track record in terms of shifting the dial, in terms of amplifying particularly restrictive practices in disability and moving people out of congregated settings. That was the work of the HSE, but championed by us. I think the work we've done in older persons, where we really amplified the voice of the resident and really tried to put the emphasis on what it's like to live here as opposed to a task-based approach. I think we've been strong, but I think we are challenged to do better, and I think that's the commitment we've made. That's not just about us. A lot of the discussion here is, have you got the levers you need? I think that is part of it, because those levers, you might never use them, but they do act as a deterrent. They do act as a barometer for performance.
Sorry, I'm out of time. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank you, Deputy Byrne. And with the agreement of the committee, I will take my slot here to prevent us having to reschedule the speakers list. You say that there's a dent in the armour. I think the stronger phrase is that the trust in HIQA and in the regulatory regime has been damaged. I suppose I have particular impact because the Benevan Nursing Home is in my own constituency. I want to first of all acknowledge the immediate briefing which the 3 local TDs for our constituency received from HIQA. It was useful in terms of answering the questions of people who were in contact with us. And you're right, they fell into different categories. There were people who were the subject of the RTE programme who had questions. There were the people who were not the subject of the RTE programme but who were resident in the nursing home at the time. Some with positive experiences, very positive experiences, some with negative experiences, and who had made reports to HIQA. And then I think the most difficult group for me was people who had family members in Benevan Nursing Home who had passed away, and they were really struggling with what might have happened. So I think we shouldn't underscore the damage that was done. Absolutely. And I think there's a wider impact then on other nursing home providers not named in the programme, where a general doubt was rightly raised in terms of how older people are cared for. So I might put some of those questions to you in order to maybe put some of the answers on the public record that we were given at the original briefing. Ms. Cliff, you were helpful in providing information in regard to what the immediate inspection response was for Benevan Nursing Home. And when I say Benevan Nursing Home, there's actually 3 nursing home providers on that site, all under DMEs and all within the Benevan campus. Can you tell me what immediate response was taking place in terms of visits to the site?
So we would have inspected actually the entire campus on the evening of June the 5th, and we did that because we wanted to be sure that what we were seeing in Benevan Manor was not being supplemented by resources from the other 2 nursing homes on site. And what we found is, in response to the programme, the registered providers, there's 3 different registered providers, had put increased staff in place in all of those centres. They had a focus on the numbers of staff that were available, and they also had a focus on the supervision, because if you'll recall, very often during the programme we heard, this is not the way to do it, close the door, we shouldn't be doing this. So that wasn't a failure of knowledge or training, that was a failure of supervision. And
so
that was
an
being
inspection
addressed
made to all 3 nursing homes on one day?
on one evening.
Yeah.
That was then followed up on subsequent dates with inspections of the nursing homes on a standalone basis.
So how many times has HIQA attended the 3 nursing homes?
Benevan Manor 3 times, Benevan House twice, and Benevan Lodge that one evening.
So in your inspections on subsequent to that, and I think people will take some reassurance from the frequency of inspections since then, has there been anything which you believe has posed an immediate threat to the health and safety or to the welfare of the people within the nursing home which would warrant closure?
No, not that we have seen so far, that you would take that ultimate step of cancelling the registration of the centre. That said, there may be other regulatory enforcement action, but obviously because that's underway or being considered, I couldn't discuss it further here at the moment, but it will form part of our regular updates to the Minister. But any immediate risk to residents, no, we did not see that on the date. We would have met with the members of the public, the relatives, spoken to the staff there. What we were really trying to understand is how had things changed so much since we were there last November.
Okay, and many people would have made the decision to place a relative there on the basis of the previous HIQA reports, which effectively were a clean bill of health. And the question arises, how can a clean bill of health be issued for a nursing home that then, albeit undercover, and that might be the operative word, undercover, a very different reality was discovered. What can you say to people who made that decision based on the reports which were issued by HIQA?
Our reports of Benevan Manor would have shown a varied regulatory history over the years, but the last report of regulatory compliance in November was a good report, and we stand over the findings of the report at that time. What we now know is since that inspection in November, there was a fundamental change to the management structure in the centre. The person in charge and the managers who supported the person in charge had all changed. 95 new staff started working in that one nursing home. 35 staff left, and the resident profile in the nursing home changed considerably between November and April.
You say resident profile, there was a higher level of dependency.
The dependency level of the residents. So in November there were 6 residents who required one-to-one, and by April that had increased to 18. And what you had was a situation where the provider knew that they were undergoing this fundamental change to the staffing and the management profile, didn't allow for that, and continued to admit residents of very high dependency. So
I'm glad you mentioned both management and also ratios, because the issue of ratios arose frequently in the programme. Now, I believe HIQA doesn't have a required ratio like there might be in childcare, for example. Is that the case?
That is the case. The regulations, and it's not HIQA doesn't have, the law doesn't set out a requirement for staffing ratios at the moment, but there is a piece of work that's well advanced in the Department of Health, what's known as the Safe Staffing and Skill Mix Framework, that is being progressed. It was a recommendation on a foot of the findings in during COVID, and it is well advanced at this stage, but I might defer to my colleagues in the department in relation to that.
Department comment on that?
It's not really my area, but definitely we're very close to getting that over the line, so they're working away on it.
Okay, so it's accepted that standard ratios are an important factor and they should be
exactly in the health and safety.
Okay. Can I ask when the department came to that conclusion?
I think it was during, like 4 or 5 years ago during COVID time, so it's obviously taken a while to work through the policy. So,
because I know the previous Minister for Older People provided additional funding and additional powers to HIQA, and I think that's reflected to some degree. But I think that issue of the ratios is really key. Okay.
We would support that work as well.
We would support that. I mean, I think it in 2 ways. One, it gives us a more objective lens to call out staffing inadequacies, but more importantly, it gives providers an obligation and a framework against which they should be judging themselves. So I think there is unanimity between ourselves and the department on the requirement for that.
Can I ask on that issue of ratio, because often people would say, you know, you have too many managers and not enough frontline services. In my view, and it is a private view, when we're looking at the programme, there were issues of culture. So they say culture is the easiest form of management, but if people feel the freedom to be able to compile reports which weren't actually carried out, if people feel the freedom to depart from standard practice which they know to be wrong, and as evidenced by close the door or this isn't the way we should do it, it was very obvious that there wasn't sufficient supervision in place there. And I would ask that whatever ratios are put in place, that there is a ratio around the level of supervision and management also.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, Deputy. I think the other piece is the qualifications of staff There isn't currently a minimum requirement in terms of qualifications. And I think if you're not appropriately skilled, you don't have enough staff and you don't have appropriate supervision, it becomes a very task-based approach, and people don't necessarily understand that the concept of care. So I think it's a very appropriate. So the Chief Nursing Officer is leading out on that work in the department. It has been implemented in the healthcare setting, and we will be confident that it's at an advanced stage, and it will definitely support.
I've actually said that on the Dáil record, that you can have all the regulations in the world, but if people are willing to fill out forms that are not that they know are not completed, if people are willing to do things which are not in good care, that any human decency would know, that poses a regulatory challenge. But I think the question is, RTE were able to discover it because of the undercover nature. So my question is undercover inspection something that's available to you at the moment, or is that something that you believe should be available to you?
I might take that one, Deputy. It's not something that's available to us, and where we do any inspection we go on, we have to be in a mindset that any evidence we gather, we may need to use it in a proceeding, whether that be for cancellation.
What's preventing you from using undercover techniques?
So the advice to us is that when we arrive on inspection, we have to declare ourselves. We have to show our warrant, which gives us access to a centre, and that we should not be entering a designated centre without showing our warrant.
Okay, that's useful. I'm very anxious to ask about the company structures.
Yeah.
When you say separate entities, the directors of them, is it your view, or is it the case that there are common directors across all of the EMEA's entities?
Yes, that is correct. So Maze Ireland, those companies at umbrella level, and then the individual registered provider companies are also comprised of the same directors.
Yeah. And are you assured that the corporate governance element, which wouldn't be a matter for you, but there's a corporate governance element in regard to directors and common directorships, and in regard of terms of limits for directors and so on, is that something you have examined in terms of these groups of nursing homes? Because I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with the idea that a group, that a corporate entity isn't accountable to you, but somehow fabricated or created corporate entities individually are accountable. It seems like a big gap in the regulatory framework.
I feel like it is one of the areas that Minister O'Donnell has really asked us our input on, and it's one that he's prioritising. I think in the principle of regulation, you've got to be able to hold the person to account who is accountable. And I think that is a fundamental principle. I think in other areas, like I understand from Central Bank, following the crisis there, they have looked at the whole area of probity, and particularly around director accountability. So it is one of the areas that the Minister has engaged with us, and I know it's one of the areas he's looking at. The simplest level, we want to make sure that the regulatory framework we have can be effective, and if the control and the accountability is held out with the provider, well, then we need to have.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to abuse my position as chair, so I have to limit myself too. So we now take a very short break, and we'll resume with Deputy McGrath.
Thank you.
10 minutes. Yep. Witnesses and members, so we resume in public session, and we'll start with Deputy Seamus McGrath.
Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here. And I don't want to repeat everything that has been said, obviously, but there will be some repetition, so I apologise. And look, first of all, I recognise the difficult job you have. It's not an easy one. When you are in that policing role, you can have many successes, but it's the failures that get highlighted. So I do understand that. And your role isn't just, in terms of policing. You have a lot of policy formulation input and so on like that. So I do recognise it. But obviously, in relation to what the country witnessed and RT investigates recently, I think it's fair to say it absolutely disgusted people. And it was an utter failure of regulation. There's no question about that. To see that kind of humiliating, degrading, disrespectful treatment of elderly citizens, people would be rightly outraged if they saw that kind of behaviour towards animals. But unfortunately, in this case, it was towards elderly citizens of this country. And I think it really resonated with people because we all have elderly relatives, and, you know, God willing, we'll be elderly ourselves someday. And we want to ensure that there is adequate trust in the system of regulation over our nursing homes. So can I just get into some specific questions, if I may? And again, look, I do apologise if there's repetition. I tried to listen as much as I could, but I may have missed some of it. What is your overall staff count, and how many of those staff are directly involved in inspections?
So we have, our staffing as of now is 450, and the number of it, the inspectorate, Chief Inspector's Office represents about 50% of the staff, but the numbers directly involved in inspections, I might just ask Finbar to confirm.
So in terms of our inspectors working in older persons, we have 37 inspectors. Inspectors working in disability services, we have 40 inspectors, and in children's services, we have 14.
Okay, so that's somewhere around 100, is it? Out of a staff of 450?
We have 120 inspectors of all types of children's, older persons, disability, healthcare and the international protection.
Okay, so out of a staff of 450, it's somewhere around 120 that are actively involved in inspections.
Yeah.
That's a small number in terms of your overall staff count, I would say, given the role you have and the importance of inspections in fulfilling that role. Would you agree?
I think maybe the way of putting it is that we have equivalent roles in terms of, we have significant roles in the area of health technology assessment and also in the area of health information standards. And while they're the numbers directly involved in inspection, they're also supported by a number of other staff. So the total number of staff in the Chief Inspector's Office is over 200.
Okay, but some of that is administration support and so on, as opposed to. Can I just ask, in terms of your overall budget, what percentage of it would you estimate is involved in the inspection role?
So I haven't got that number, but it's well over half.
Well over half
in
of your
the kind of the
budget.
broader inspection regulation.
Okay, thank you. And I think you said earlier that over 80% of your visits are unannounced. Is that correct? Can you just briefly walk us through what happens when you make an unannounced visit to a nursing home? You walk into reception, you say, "Hi, I'm from HIQA." What happens?
So when the inspectors will arrive at a nursing home, they will identify themselves. They will show their identification and show their authorisation as inspectors of social services. Depending then on whether the inspection is planned or unplanned, announced or unannounced. If it's unannounced, people will, the people in the centre will be getting themselves organised and together, and our inspectors will very often go right or left from the main entrance and start walking the centre.
That's what I'm getting at. Do you wait at reception for 5 minutes while someone comes to meet you, or are you straight into it? Because word will spread faster than the speed of light, I would say, that there are inspectors here from HIQA, and I think that's really important that how that process is carried out.
There's no doubt about it, and as you're walking down the corridor you can hear the phones pinging.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. News will spread like wildfire regardless of whether there's 20-bedded centre or a 185-bedded centre.
So I suppose that brings me to my next point, and the RT Investigates obviously uncovered what it did through undercover tactics. Is that something you have ever deployed?
No, we haven't. We're required to show our identification and authorisation to be present in the centre when we've arrived, so we don't employ undercover tactics.
So are you saying you're legally not allowed to carry out undercover?
Our advice would be it is a requirement to demonstrate your right to be there in the premises of a designated centre, and that you do that by showing your authorisation.
I think that's the crux of the issue here. I mean, RT uncovered what they did because they were undercover. They were there. Nobody knew who they were. They witnessed firsthand the behaviour of residents in these nursing homes. I think for you to really fulfil your role, you have to carry out the same type of tactics as RTE. So what needs to happen for you to be able to go in undercover and witness firsthand what is happening? What needs to change for that to happen?
I think where we would like to start is looking at how we can strengthen what we're doing at the minute in terms of capturing the culture. I mean, what we saw on that television programme was a service where staff didn't have a reporting culture. They were happy to falsify documents.
Sorry for interrupting. It wasn't just about documents. It was the absolute inhumane treatment from human to human. And you're not going to ever see that unless they don't know you're there. That's the reality. You know, you can make unannounced visits, and as you said, the phones are pinging as you're walking down the corridor. So nobody is going to treat a resident in that manner in front of you. You have to have eyes and ears there without people knowing. So I'm just asking what legally needs to change for that to happen, because that's the only way you'll have effective regulation and inspection, in my view.
If we were to explore that, I think we'd have to look at what legal constraints there are there. We haven't explored that, Deputy.
Okay, I'd respectfully suggest that's something that needs to happen, because I think that is the only way people will have full trust in the inspection system for nursing homes. Can I just ask, I think you mentioned earlier that you have a duty or a requirement to visit nursing homes once a year. Are you fulfilling that duty? Yes, every nursing home has been visited in the past 12 months.
80% of nursing homes last year were inspected once, with a further 40% inspected twice. And so far this year, we have inspected, I think it's about 70% of all inspections once. I have that here. We have inspected, carried out 438, 74% of nursing homes as of the 15th of July had been inspected, and of those a further 6% had been inspected twice.
Okay. Okay, sorry, could you repeat that? 70?
So far this year,
Yeah.
74% of nursing homes have
Okay.
been inspected.
So by the end of the year, you'd hope to have visited them all?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
That's
our
all once,
base
but the
principle,
majority
once a year.
would
Yes.
have more than one visit?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you. And do further inspections follow on from issues that you may have seen in a previous inspection, or do they follow complaints? What is the criteria for you to
All of
decide?
the above.
All of the above?
Yeah. So you have a baseline inspection, and your first inspection of a nursing home may be informed by notifications you received, as in the trending of those notifications. It may be informed by unsolicited information or protected disclosures that we receive, or it may be to follow up on the findings of a previous inspection and a requirement for a provider to implement a compliance plan.
Can I ask and look, I couched this with my earlier comments in terms of you can have many successes, but your failings is what you're judged on. And in terms of accountability, what accountability has there been within HIQA for what we saw in RT Investigates in terms of the utter failure of regulation and inspection? Has there been any accountability within the organisation for that?
So I think our accountability is to here and to the Oireachtas, and in fact the Chief Inspector has a direct accountability to the Oireachtas. I think Deputy, the important thing is that there are kind of three strands to what we're looking at. The first is to look at the regulatory powers. The second is to look at, like in terms of behaviour and culture, having adequate staffing, having skilled staffing and having supervision will go much further than us doing a second or a third inspection, because it embeds that every day, regardless of who's there, that's what happens. And then I think the third thing is we currently get about 1,100 what we call UROIs in every year. We get 1,100 concerns in which reflect staff often raising a concern that they might not raise when we're there on inspection. So we don't just rely on inspections. And then I think the last piece is very much around how we do our own work. And Finbar has referenced earlier on about looking at proxies for culture. And that is around some of the information that we are now going to be mandated through regulatory forms.
And can I ask, as the head of the organisation, do you feel the public have confidence in HIQA at this point in time?
I think, as I said, Deputy, earlier on, I think there has been damage to the confidence because of the nature of what we all used. It was so harrowing and so difficult. I think a lot of people have also acknowledged, like yourself, that we do and continue to do a lot of good work. But I think we have to own the challenges that have been identified.
Do you measure public confidence? Have you any way of? Do you engage? Do you survey?
We conduct a number of surveys. There are 5 surveys we conduct with patients and residents of nursing homes. About across the domain, about 80,000 people have participated, and they basically are independent of us, but they're amplifying what's good about services and what needs to change. We also engaged, we've done as part of our corporate plan, we engaged extensively with a wide range of stakeholders.
And my final question, Chair, if I may, it's in terms of the RT Investigates programme and the shock to the nation in relation to that, can you assure people that there will be, or there has been, a step change in approach from HIQA in trying to address issues like that?
Absolutely. I think we've given a public commitment, but more importantly, we've got to act. I think the actions around the immediate actions in relation to escalatory action in relation to the AMACE and nursing homes, I think in terms of our engagement with the Minister around regulatory and policy reform, and then in terms of our own approach. And I think a communication piece to the public. We've talked about a communication strategy that seeks to amplify the good work we do, but also the areas that we're now focusing on. So,
okay, thank you very much.
Hi, thanks a million for coming today. In terms of ensuring that we do have trust and accountability, and HIQA is properly accountable and that we have confidence, we need to make sure we have a robust regime. So what are your top 3 asks to the Minister and to the Department?
So I think the 3 of them, I think the first one is looking at regulatory reform, and I think for Deputy Gagan we talked about being able to hold corporate entities to account properly. I think that's definitely a key one. I think in terms of what we witnessed and what we had also already identified through our own inspection processes, that having adequate staffing, having adequate supervision, and having staff that have the necessary skills, I think we call that out, and we called it out in both centres through our regulatory, but having a stronger mandate to call that out through the state staffing framework. And then I think the third thing is for ourselves, we have had some regulatory change, which means we can now seek information more routinely. I think that is where what I'd call monitoring surveillance between inspections. And that's about us as well as, but having the regulatory right to seek that information means that we can provide better assurance between inspections. They'd be the 3 that I'd say.
So, but do you have that right?
There's been a change in the Patient Safety Act which allows us now to seek information. The definition of it is quite defined, but we're currently engaging with the Department to see can we leverage that further so that we can have surveillance data. And I think that would go some way towards addressing some of the concerns about undercover, because you would actually have the information that informs behaviour and culture.
And has the Department given you a timeline?
I think we're actively engaged with our colleagues in older person services. I think we're pushing an open door with the Minister in terms of his personal commitment, and Minister Carol McNeill, yeah.
Okay, great. And in terms of the trends and the areas, the room for improvement that you will have seen through your various different surveys and stakeholder engagement, what are the trends there? What are people calling out? In particular, what are patients calling out, and what are people who are working in these services calling out?
I think it's a very good question, Deputy Boland. I think if you look at the inpatient survey, firstly, it's really important to say overwhelmingly people are satisfied. And 2 other things to say about that survey. One is that we're one of the few jurisdictions that has national centralised, organised surveys. And somebody mentioned CQC earlier on. There's been quite a critique in the UK of the multiple surveys and the fact that they don't coordinate. But going back to what they identify, 3 things really. Firstly, communication. That a lot of people, when they're anxious and they're in hospital or their families are in hospital, they need clear communication. And I think that's a clear theme. I think when you're in a situation where you're a patient and you're dealing with a doctor, there's a kind of an imbalance of power. So having time to explain what's going on, I think, is a second thing. And then I think for people in residential care, it is really having much more say in terms of what they can do. And I think the early response to delivery of care in nursing home settings was very much about protect. But some of that might have been taking away the freedom to make decisions, even if those decisions aren't always the best ones, because we can do that when we live at home. So I think they're the 3 things that come through. And interestingly, we've done a survey around bereavement, we've done a survey around end of life, we've done a survey around maternity, we've done them over a number of years, and those findings are consistent. So what we're working with the HSE in particular, but also with private providers, and we're finding private hospitals in particular.
So like a patient-centred approach, and that's reassuring to hear. In terms of HIQA yourself, obviously your responsibilities have grown. I see that your employees have grown to 450. Do you, in terms of resignations or attrition, what level of attrition have you had recently?
Well, I think we've a very strong track record of attracting and retaining our staff. Most competitions we fill on the first filling. We're a bit different in that respect. And over 40% of our promotions are filled by people from within the organisation. So we've a strong track record of retention.
And in terms of losing people, your attrition rate over the last?
I think it's about 8%. So I think it compares very favourably with international best practice and national other public sector bodies.
And we have seen across the public service, I suppose, that there have been employee difficulties in litigation. What was the level of your employee disputes? Or?
Very, very low. In fact, we have very few requirements to use WRC or external bodies. Two of the things we do, Deputy, we conduct through Ipsos, we conduct every 2 years a staff engagement survey. And overwhelmingly, staff have a very strong loyalty to the brand of HIQA, which is why it's very important. They also have a strong commitment to the values of what we do.
So would you have had any contentious?
I would say that the two areas that have come up is, one is we recruit at quite a senior level, so opportunities for progression and staying. And also a challenge around...
But you have a number of the contentious, maybe the employees who've left in contentious situations where NDAs would have been required, etc.
I think in my time, we've had none. And I'm 3 years there.
Right across HIQA, none?
Yeah, none, yeah. We can provide that information for you separately, but we would have, we have very good HR practices, and I think just to your point around how staff experience the working in HIQA, the Ipsos gives us good insights to some of the challenges and some of the tensions for staff around doing a demanding job and always striving for excellence. The other piece that's come through in some of our surveys is just the opportunity for making a difference. So that's the positive piece. But in terms of, we can certainly provide any information around that, but it's very, very small.
And then obviously you have 2 law firms working for you. What type of advice do they provide? Because you obviously have in-house.
So we would have had, we do 2 types of thing. We use our legal services in 2 ways. One, we support the department significantly in the development of new legislation. So, for example, when we went out to tender the last time, we were looking for experiences in the area of cybersecurity, because it's very likely that we're going to become the competent authority. So we would work very closely with the department in framing the legislation and looking at our own experience. And we would, for example, in the home support.
I'm just conscious of time. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cut you.
And then the other area would be in relation to where there's judicial reviews or challenge, or where we go to court as part of our regulatory space. We use our own teams by and large, but where we have to defend cases, we may need to use external, and sometimes we've used senior counsel. And for example, in CHI, we would have used external support because we wanted to protect the integrity of that report.
And you obviously went through a procurement process for the legal advisors, so you have a negotiated discounted rate with both those firms.
Yeah.
Good. Do you negotiate with the barristers, the counsel you instruct on the rates?
Well, I think they would be usually appointed through the firms we're dealing with, and I actually don't know the answer to that, but
you can negotiate with them, just so you know.
All right, okay. I think we try and use our own internal resources, which are very, very competent and experienced, as much as we can. Where we feel that there is a particular challenge and maybe a risk of an action not being successful, we would use. And our costs in terms of, our overall costs in terms of legal are around 170, I think.
They were low in 23, so there's an increase in 24.
And that's to do with taking on of new functions and supporting the advices in relation to that.
In terms of the inspections, so obviously you said, remind me again the number of inspectors you have?
We said 120 across all of our functions.
Yeah.
And how do you ensure there is no conflict with those inspectors? So in terms of the fact that they have no familial relationship to any of the entities that they're inspecting, or perhaps they may have worked there before, how do you ensure that that doesn't arise? Because I suppose you might confirm that both of those facts would be a conflict of interest.
They would be.
And then secondly, how do you ensure that those conflicts don't arise?
So we do have a conflicts of interest policy, and because it's been the subject of media attention, I might ask Susan just to explain how that operates and how we guard against either perceived or actual conflicts of interest.
So we do have a conflict of interest policy, as Angela has set out there, and that begins from the time somebody takes up employment. It's one of the first conversations that they'll have with their line manager, where they will identify any centres. In my case, it would be for the team of inspectors of nursing homes, any nursing homes where they may have worked, where they may have relatives who work, where they may have had some engagement through a former role, because we draw our people from the nursing home sector predominantly, the acute or the community health services. So there is, Ireland's a small country. That conflict of interest policy is a dynamic process because things can change during the lifetime of your employment in the organisation. What we require is that somebody doesn't inspect a nursing home that they have worked in for 3 years, a minimum of 3 years after they start working with HIQA.
And do you mind me asking, do you think that's sufficient? I suppose, knowing everything you know now, does that need to be reviewed? And I assume you will continually and maybe annually review these policies.
Well, it's dynamic. If somebody moves to work in a nursing home or transfers between nursing homes, it might cause one of our inspectors to reassess their conflict of interest policy. So it's not just an annual basis, it's run on an everyday basis, if you like. The 3-year mark has served us well, but the question will always be to the inspector, do you feel you can independently inspect this centre and come to the judgments that would need to be made at the time? And if the inspector is comfortable that yes, sufficient time has passed, they don't believe there could be any conflict of interest, and we don't have a reason to believe there could be a perception of a conflict of interest, then that 3-year pattern has served us well. But it is mindful that it is dynamic and it can change on a day-to-day basis. You know, I personally had to declare a conflict of interest in the last couple of weeks because of a member of my family taking up employment in a nursing home. I won't have any oversight of that nursing home.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
And Deputy Connolly.
And thank you all for being here. And I just want to pay tribute to the range of work that comes under your remit. It's really astounding, and it has been expanded. So my first question, have you enough staff and have you enough resources to carry out the whole range of entities that you supervise and monitor?
Thank you, Deputy. So I think we are well resourced for what we do.
No. So we're here just, you have huge responsibility.
Yeah.
So have you enough to carry out those responsibilities?
I think, Deputy, what I would say is that every new function we take on, we seek the staffing that we require, that we believe we require to do that function. And
you're getting those staff?
And we get the staff.
So there's no question of governance or monitoring or the standard being reduced because of lack of staff?
No, I think we did have a challenge in one area for a period of time in disability because of the rate of growth of the number of individual disability centres, but we successfully engaged with the department and we secured.
You're happy at the moment with the level of staff, and you've pointed out at any given time agency staff is 3%.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
What would have been the highest? That's the average. What would have been the highest percentage? Would it have ever been 10%?
I think it really runs more than 15 or 16 staff at any one time. They wouldn't be the same.
Percentage-wise, would it have, it would in around 3%?
3%, 3%, yeah.
Is the price of that commensurate with what you're getting? You're implying a recruitment firm, I gather.
Yes.
Yeah, on a regular basis, the same recruitment firm?
The recruitment firm is...
It's the same recruitment firm. It's somebody we've contracted with through a procurement process.
How long is that contract for?
Oh, our contracts would normally be for 3 years with the option of renewal.
Of renewal. Yeah. So that's been constantly renewed then, is it?
It has been renewed once from memory.
And will it ever go back out then?
Oh yeah, it would.
So that's all tied in.
Go back out to the market.
So the costs seem high in relation to that, but maybe I'm...
Well, it would depend on the type of staffing that we were bringing in through the agency, and sometimes there might be some higher paid staff if we had a specialist area in ICT or HR or maybe finance, which are the areas where we typically would have.
Would it be fair to say you're not facing the same obstacles or hurdles that other entities face in terms of recruitment and retention? I think that's what you've said.
I think we have a very strong interest in people coming to work in HIQA, and typically, with the exception of ICT, where we can't pay the market rate in some
Might
areas.
come back to that in a minute. Just so at this stage, an awful lot of the questions have been asked and answered. So I just want to zone in on a few different
That's okay,
things
Deputy,
quickly. You've included IPAS, or IPAS has been included. How many centres are there? How many have been inspected? Where are we with that?
Okay, I might ask Sean Egan to come in on that, because Sean is our Director of Healthcare Regulation.
Thank you, Deputy, for the question. So we have a very defined role in the monitoring of IPAS services.
I'm just going to ask at this stage the number in the country,
so
the number inspected.
Last year, we inspected all 51 services. That
So it's
fell under
51 in total.
It's actually fallen in terms of the number that we currently have a remit for. So we have a legal remit to inspect services that are designated as permanent by the Minister of Equality, and that number has actually fallen in recent times. So this year it's actually down to 35 at this stage. So
just explain that to me. You have a legal permit for?
So within the legislation, there's a definition around what is designated as permanent. That designation is defined by the Minister, and the Minister determines the list essentially that are open for us to inspect. So
there are many more centres than that, but
there are
you've no
so we're currently, I suppose, empowered to inspect about 11% of all of the centres.
11%?
11, yeah. There are over 300 centres that we're aware of. The majority of them are what are known as emergency centres, and we have no remit to inspect those centres at the current
remit
time.
for the emergency?
No.
And 11% of all the others?
Yes.
And have all those been inspected now?
They have, yeah, and in fact a number of them have been inspected on a number of different occasions.
Okay. Are they unannounced as well?
There's a majority of them are unannounced inspections. That there are certain inspections that are conducted on an unannounced basis, and that's generally to, I suppose, meet certain individuals that we might need to engage with at a senior management level. Typically, inspections where we need to go in and look at a specific issue that we've already identified.
Could you tell me briefly what issues have arisen?
So there've been, we published an overview report last year, and that report outlined a number of positive findings in terms of the experience of people using services. We've also identified...
What issues have arisen?
So there have been a number of issues in terms of course, the availability of accommodation. It's very restricted, and as a consequence of that, a lot of the accommodation is quite overcrowded.
Overcrowding, what other issues?
Overcrowding, we've identified issues in the context of understanding and awareness of risk management as we would expect it as a systems regulator. This is a new sector to be monitored.
I just want the issues.
Sure.
So
there's overcrowding
issues
has been an issue. One of the requirements of the national standards is that each service has what's known as a reception officer. So it's a new position that's been created under the standards, and really it's to improve the level of kind of awareness.
Have they got in the reception officers?
A number of them haven't, and that's something that we've flagged.
Do you know what might be helpful if you just give us those issues?
Sure.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'm really sorry for. I'm watching that clock and I'm watching that chair. So just in relation to private hospitals, it has taken some time to bring that under your remit. How many private hospitals have been inspected?
So I might take that question again. So there are 22 private hospitals that are available for us to inspect. We only got the remit to begin to inspect them in September of last year.
So you're beginning that process.
Yeah, we've inspected 11 of them thus
11.
far. Yeah, and we will
again, any comment on what issues are arising?
In general, the findings have been quite positive. We're actually at the stage of just being about to publish a number of the early inspection reports, so they should be available.
They'll be the first reports?
Yes, so they will be available. Generally, the findings have been quite positive thus far.
That's good. Just, Mr. Culfer, are you the Chief Inspector now, or a designate? Or just clarify your position.
Our Chief Inspector is on leave at the moment for personal reasons, and I've been assigned by the board, designated by the Board of Directors under the Health Act
so that's the
to
word
designate to fulfil her function.
And then there's a deputy as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so just under the legislation, you have a particular role, haven't you, under the legislation? Your role is set out under legislation. Yeah. And have you all the powers? I think you said something earlier on and I missed it. I was watching too many things. But just, have you, it's to register, to inspect, and also to bring prosecutions if necessary. Yeah. Have you all of those powers? Have they been delegated to you now?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
Okay. Were they all delegated at the same time by the board?
Yes.
That was back in November, was it?
Yeah.
So all of the necessary powers have been delegated?
Yes.
Thanks very much. Then just going back into relation to IT and legal services, and it was mentioned before, the same firms and possible conflict of interest. So the same firm advising HIQA or the health executive or the third parties. I wasn't really reassured with the answer that was given there in relation to that. So has it happened that a particular company's solicitors have advised HIQA at the same time as they're advising the nursing home or the health executive?
I think maybe Finbar or Susan, I would be fairly confident that, I would be very confident that when we had Beecham's and when we have these two firms, one of the requirements when they respond to the tender is that they demonstrate that they have a conflict, because it's a small system.
I understand.
So I don't think I am not aware that it has arisen, but I am also aware of where they have declared that conflict and they have stepped back from being involved.
How many times would that have happened?
In my time, it happened in one specific instance in relation to the ICT project. In relation to regulation, I'm not aware that there was ever any conflict in relation to Beecham's, but in relation to the issue that was raised earlier, should Mason Hayes Curran have a relationship with the Mays, we would put the necessary safeguards that would not allow for them to take action. We have the safeguards
You're
to allow
satisfied
yes,
that your safeguards are there for a conflict of interest to prevent that happening?
And even in our first, Mason Hayes are very new with us, we had a meeting with them in relation to the nursing home issue, and the very first thing they need, in relation to a specific question, the very first thing they raised with us, we need to do a conflict check there. So I think the companies are very aware.
I'm just going to stop you on that. I'm taking your reassurance on that for the moment. Just then in relation to the ICT and the project, and you gave a specific figure for that. I think it's 8-point-something million.
8.6, yes.
Okay. Does that cover everything?
It does.
Is there a maintenance cost every year in addition to that?
So,
sorry, the 8.6 million is the cost of the installation, the project.
Yeah.
So at the end of the project, when we get to that, then the capital expenditure will finish, and it'll move into then a kind of a
what is the
normal
cost
operating.
Of that? What will be the operating cost?
We had put in the business case with about $1 million a year. Between software licensing, managed service, and hosting. There's three different elements.
And I'm running out of time. The last question, just in relation to conflicts of interest here again, in relation to procurement and getting these experts on board, and maybe people that had worked for different entities are now in the companies. How do you deal with that? Have you been reassured in relation to that? Have any conflicts arisen?
No, I mean, I know, for example, during the procurement process, there was a member of staff who stepped down off the procurement panel because they had a relative who was involved with one of the companies who was bidding. So they kind of excluded themselves. So that we have a conflict of interest policy internally where we'd expect that of people to do that.
So we've completed our first round of questioning. I'm going to give Deputy Gagan a supplementary of 3 minutes, and that's open to any other members who wish to take it as well. And we can conclude at that point. Deputy Gagan.
Thanks everybody, and thanks for all the witnesses for all of the replies you've given so far. Just to take up Ms. Cliff there, did I hear you correctly that you said that in November in the Benevan Manor there were 6 residents who required one-to-one care, and that by April there were 18 residents that required one-to-one care, and there was no commensurate increase in staffing?
No, sorry, and apologies if I didn't make that clear. The staff to provide the one-to-one care were available. The point I was making that in the context of a centre that was struggling with changing governance and management, onboarding and inducting new staff, that they continued to increase the rate of admissions and the number of admissions with very high dependency levels. So we are satisfied that anywhere one-to-one care was funded, that was in place. But it was in the context of the overall picture of the stresses that were on that centre during that time.
So they did have a sufficient number of staff to deal with the increased number of residents that required one-to-one care. Is that your conclusion?
on the days that we were on inspection, every resident who was meant to have a one-to-one care, who was funded to receive
Sorry, but
one-to-one
now
care.
after the fact, after the prime time investigate, like where we are now, whatever about when the inspection, you know, is that your conclusion that they at all times had enough staff to deal
They
with?
had the numbers, but the familiarity with policies, procedures, the supervision of new staff who were onboarding and staff who hadn't worked in the sector before was missing.
So what happened here? I mean, is it, you know, reckless behaviour by one or two members of staff that's sort of being hinted at here? Like, is it bad management of this particular centre? Like, what went wrong here? So catastrophically wrong.
I think it was a failure of management and supervision.
And
I think it was a failure to allow for the stress that was on the centre, to failure to recognise it. There's 3 floors in that centre, and there's 3 very different cultures on the 3 different floors. And the residents with the greatest level of need and the higher dependency were all accommodated on one floor. And even relatives who spoke to us said, my relative is fine now, she's on the ground floor, but I wasn't that happy when she was on the first floor. And that was the issue. And they lost sight of it. They didn't recognise it, and they didn't listen to what the staff were telling them. We can see in records of meetings going back to earlier this year that the staff were raising this as an issue, and it wasn't being addressed. But I think that goes to the immaturity of their management structure that was in place. If you change the person in charge, at the same time, you changed the support structures behind that person, assistant director of nursing, clinical nurse manager. You lose organisational knowledge, you lose centre-specific knowledge, and you also lose that innate knowledge of the residents. And when you haven't that at the management level, it doesn't transform down through the structures, through the nursing staff, to the carers. And that's what happened there.
And are all those people still in place? Is anybody left? Like, has there been any resignation? Has there been any single person held to account for what we witnessed?
Many of the incidents that were seen on the primetime investigate gave rise to independent external investigations commissioned by the registered providers. We do know that in Benevan Manor, a number of staff no longer work there, either by
what about the
their
managers,
decision
though?
to
What about
resign.
the managers, the people who are responsible for all this? You explained it was the managers more so. Well, I don't want to paraphrase you, but you made a very clear determination there in respect of management and culture and governance. Have any of the managers been held to account?
No, I'm not aware of any managers that
And
have
like, isn't
left
that
us
not
yet.
really problematic? I mean, in 2019, when RTE Primetime Investigates did another incredible public service value, but it was another horrific programme in terms of crashes and what was going on in particular crash. Within a number of months, the owner of one of those crashes resigned, like fell on her sword. But we haven't seen any of that. So we're left to sort of harangue you guys to ensure that you're inspecting nursing homes correctly. And there's been no accountability for the appalling wrongdoing that took place. And I do wonder, like, if that was children or if that was a school, I do wonder about the response. And it frightens me, really, that there's a sort of, I don't know what it is, that we can accept that level of appalling care for elderly people in the most aged periods of their life, and their dignity completely taken from them, and that we've sort of accepted that no one is to be held to account for this.
So what we are doing is we're working through our processes that are available to us. So we have concluded our inspections, and on foot of those inspections, we will now be engaging with the register provider in relation to the next actions. But I'm sure you do understand, whereas escalating regulatory action, there's a limit that I can say at this stage, but we are required to update the Minister as we progress through these actions, and we will be doing that.
Deputy Conley.
Thanks very much. I think, let me put my hands up, I think the model is totally wrong, and when we went down the road of private for profit nursing homes, it was a problem. And so we've set up structures to try and monitor that, and it's the wrong model for me. And I'm in Galway, and you've mentioned Apari. They're also in Waterford and they're different places. And so when those places close down because they're no longer fit for purpose and they're no longer making profit, the health executive has to move in, isn't that right? At public cost, which is never factored in at all into the cost. People are left. I remember going back in Galway, Oughterard, and there's a whole list of places that have closed or have been in trouble in the city and the county. And suddenly public health nurses and doctors have to go in, sort out the mess. On public money that has never been factored in. I just say that for what it's worth. It's very difficult to watch it all of the time. So in Galway, has that, the one run by Apri closed?
No, there are several nursing homes that continue to be operated by the HSE on what we call the Section 64 register, which means the HSE is operating the nursing home as if the registered provider. So currently there is one in Galway.
There's just one?
No, I was just about to say there's one in Galway City, there's one out on the outskirts of Galway, there's one in Roscommon. There's one in, there's a couple down in Cork as well.
All being run by the health executive.
The HSE is operating those centres on the Section 64 register as if the registered
with
provider.
With the staff that were there with the private provider?
Yes.
With public staff as well?
They have oversight. So the HSE puts in a management structure that they oversee.
And on occasions, public staff as well?
Yes, as required.
And so the ones you mentioned in Galway, are they the same provider, the same company?
They would all be different registered provider companies, but they, between one of the Galway ones and Roscommon, there were common directors. Between the one in Galway, the one in Kerry, they were common directors. But I suppose on a positive note, we have also seen ones where the registration was cancelled and that has been registered with a new intended provider now.
Yeah. My difficulty again is I see public health nurses like in Carrow with 13 beds empty, not enough staff, and then we have to put staff into the private system to keep it going. It's a madness, really. I don't expect you to comment on it, but it's an utter madness to me, and it's certainly not value for money, which is our role here, and it's never put into the picture. One last question was in relation to the ICT project. That's the same company, I think, that did the ICT for the arts.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Could I add a...
Of course, Mr. Curry.
I suppose it's just that's why we take a very measured approach to cancelling. We use our regulatory powers to try and drive improvement, and cancellation is our last option because it impacts on the residents first and foremost. It's their home, causes great anxiety.
I understand all that. I know your reluctance.
It also impacts on the HSE in terms of the resources they have to divert.
But this is the dilemma that you've been placed in, that you should not be in that dilemma in the first place, because now we're making decisions in relation to whether the health executive have enough staff or enough resources, and they're depleting resources elsewhere.
Thanks, Deputy Conley. So thank you very much. I think that concludes our engagement with the Health Insurance and Quality Authority. I want to thank Ms Fitzgerald and her officials for being with us here today. I'd also like to thank the officials and representatives from the Department of Health and the HSE. So, members, before we depart, is it agreed that the clerk seek any follow-up information and to carry out the agreed actions arising from today's meeting? Agreed. Thank you. So the committee is now adjourned until 9:30 on Thursday, the 18th of September, with the Houses of the Oireachtas Commission. The meeting is now adjourned. Good morning.